My apologies. And once more, I am Clay Douglas. I am the Free American. And I mentioned one of my friends, Ted Gunderson. And this goes way back now. This goes way back, almost to the beginning. We're coming up on the anniversary of 9/11. But that wasn't the first bombing of the World Trade Center, was it? There were other things that happened. Listen to Ted Gunderson. And my friend Anthony Hilder. I'll be a part of his new film on chemtrails.
I was head of the FBI Southern California for the most part, except for two southern
Ted's
counties,
dead now.
California, San Diego, and Imperial County.
Just died.
I was in charge. I had over 700 personnel under my command. I had a budget of $22.5 million. We were the elite investigative organization of the world in our day. There's no question about who was responsible for the 1993 bombing of the World Trade Center. Through their informant, Salam, the FBI informant Salam, they had control of whether or not to place a dummy bomb or a real bomb there. They placed a real bomb, and the reason they did was to pass the anti-terrorism legislation. There were only 6 people killed, not enough to pass the legislation. Now, by the way, the reason there were only 6 people killed is because the car bomb would be placed by a support beam of some sort, a pillar or post, and there was another car illegally parked there, so they couldn't put the bomb exactly where they wanted. Otherwise, that whole Trade Center, the World Trade Center, would have come down at that time. That was their plan. So then, in 1995, we had the Murrah building in Oklahoma City, 168 people killed. Then, a year later, they passed the anti-terrorism legislation. But I'm telling you that the FBI knew about this, they had control of it, and did nothing to stop it. We had the Marine Barracks, their embassy in Kenya. We had Pan Am 103. We had the USS Cole. We had Oklahoma City. We had the World Trade Center in 1993. Our government was involved in some of those. I can't say all of them because I don't know, but I do have documentation that there was government implication in some of these. We'll discuss them as we go.
Well, Ted, the people out there, I mean you, did you know that the World Trade Center went up when it was bombed internally? That it all was put together by an organization called the FBI.
This is 1993.
Yeah.
Yes, I have a, I'll show this on camera, a newspaper article from the New York Times, and it was also an article in the LA Times, by the way, and it's dated October 28, 1993. And it's a result of testimony in the trial, and the informant, the FBI informant in the trial, a fellow named Salam, a 43-year-old former Egyptian army officer.
Salam.
Right, he was the informant of the FBI, and he recorded his conversations secretly with Israel. So when it came time for trial, he said, hey, wait a minute, here's what really happened. Now, he told the FBI in advance that they were going to bomb it. He was assigned, given the assignment to put the bomb together, and he went to his supervisor, his FBI supervisor, and said, we're going to put a dummy bomb in here, right? And the FBI supervisor said, no, we're going to put a real bomb.
Oh, wait a minute. Let's name names. John Antisep
Was supervisor.
Yeah, he was the supervisor for the FBI, and he winds up in with having something to do with the Kenya investigation. So here's a guy who's involved in setting up the World Trade Center for to be blown up, and it resulted in the deaths of six individuals, over 1,000 injured. Nearly $100 million.
$500 million. Oh, no.
A lot of them, millions of dollars.
Millions of dollars, yeah.
And
in dead property damage.
Right. Now, if justice were done, the FBI agent would be not only in jail, but executed for murder in the first degree. And if the chief suspect in the attack upon the World Trade Center on September 11th, is not the chief suspect the individuals or individual agency that bombed the World Trade Center in 1993?
Based on what happened in 1993, the FBI not only knew in advance they were going to bomb the World Trade Center, they furnished the ingredients for the bomb. Based on that, I would say that the FBI is the primary suspect, but also I think we have to consider the CIA. And the reason you have to consider the CIA is because when you skyjack 4 airplanes simultaneously with 19 skyjackers, that is no small operation. That took years to plan, number one. And hundreds of people had to know about it in advance. Now, our government, NSA, was monitoring bin Laden's phone calls in February 1998. Are you going to tell me for 1 minute that we didn't know about this in advance? The CIA had to know about it. The FBI had to know about it. The Mossad had to know about it.
Now,
MI5.
I don't believe that. I'm going to have to disagree with Ted here. Ted is trying to, he believes bin Laden, he met bin Laden, but my guest just the other day met bin Laden. They knew they were opportunities. Bin Laden was working for us. The FBI never charged bin Laden for 9/11. And the things that happened, 9/11, folks, I blew the whistle on that back in March, actually, of 2004. Probably did it before that, but that's the day that I put the building number 7 on the cover, asking why did that fall. No plane hit it, no, and Larry Silverstein made the quote, yeah, me and the fire department made the decision to pull building number 7. If they did that, if that's an accurate statement that he made on public television, then they had to have explosives wired into the building before and brought it down as a controlled demolition. Fire on the 14th floor could not have done that. No plane hit it. And I pointed out in March of 2004, if they had explosives planted in building number 7, what are the odds? Now, what I revealed in that March issue that was a little bit more accurate and gave the true picture of it was a photographer that had almost built a career of photographing the Twin Towers. Stumbled into an engineering meeting. They thought he was part of the team, an engineering team that they had put together that had been working on the problems with the Twin Towers for almost 10 years prior to 9/11. And they had come to the conclusion that with the asbestos, with the fact that windows were falling off, they could not repair the building because they couldn't build scaffolding that high. So the conclusion was the only thing to do was to bring the buildings down. The port authorities, all Jewish, made a sweetheart deal for a 99-year lease with Larry Silverstein, who allowed them and probably the Israelis that were caught with explosives are about to go over a bridge, and all of these Israelis were released and sent back to the Mossad by Michael Chertoff, your then Homeland Security Director. Or, actually, maybe it wasn't Chertoff. It could have been one of Bush's guys, Rumsfeld, I believe. But I referred to it as an exaggerated case of Jewish lightning. They did make, somebody made billions of dollars off the insurance. And the buildings came down from explosives inside, not from the planes hitting them. And everybody knows that. But why isn't anybody doing anything? Now, I don't know what this is about. But here's the promo for it, and then we'll give it a listen and see what's going on. History's worst serial killer roams the earth. Calculating, methodical, and brutal. The victims, men, women, and children, numbering 170 million in the 20th century. Tragically, these victims actually depend upon their killer. They trust the killer to protect them, but in the end, using laws, ethics, propaganda, and finally sheer force, the killer renders millions powerless and destroys them. Horrific persecution, slavery, and mass murder engulf nation after nation. Germany, China, Cambodia, Soviet Union, Guatemala, Uganda, Turkey, Rwanda. No country is safe. Not even the USA. But who is this killer whose victims incomprehensibly outnumber every Bundy, Manson, or Dahmer? Well, we'll see. Now, this, I have a feeling, and I'll explain it to you. This is about a book and a DVD, actually, a DVD. And it's put out by WorldNet Daily. It says, Innocence Betrayed. Now, what they're talking about here, I believe, is governments. It was the Soviet Union government put together and run by Stalin that killed 60 million white Russians. That's white Christian Russians, a majority. There's been a Holocaust this century. I've referred to it as possibly, maybe we've been in Armageddon and the press just didn't bother to tell us. But I've got a feeling that this is put out by WorldNet Daily, who's pretty well financed. Joe Farah never liked me much because I talked about the Jewish angle. And when I talk about the Jewish angle, I want you to understand my guest yesterday and the day before, and who runs Veterans Today that I'm writing for. He's Jewish. So this ain't about your race or religion. And you got a president that's a Muslim. Now, that may be as much or more of a danger than the Jew, but they're both pointing the finger. Now you got people on the left that are saying, oh man, and these are all financed by Israel, propaganda. Israel spends a few $1 billion a year of your money on good propaganda for themselves. So this is WorldNet Daily, and I don't know exactly where they're going to point the finger at this. There are governments, and some of them are Muslim controlled, some of them are communist controlled. China has murdered a lot of people. Hang on, let's see. Those who do not remember the past are condemned to repeat it. Verboten.
What happens when self-defense
Prohibited.
is against the law? What happens when the protectors become the predators? What happens when innocents are betrayed? Imagine that 2/3 of all Americans disappear. 170 million people. Or that the countries of Germany, France, and Spain are virtually wiped off the map. 170 million people gone. In the 20th century, that's how many innocents were slaughtered, tortured, starved, mutilated, worked to death, bayoneted, hanged, annihilated at the hands of their governments. They had no means to defend themselves.
Yeah. 170 million. That's almost incomprehensible. Let me have a paper towel. It is to me. But who is responsible for doing that? They don't give you a clue, do they? And what do you call them? Communists, Muslims, Jews, Arabs? It was pointed out to me yesterday. Reminded there are all the people that have broken into my house, that have ripped me off, have stolen from me, have been Christians. I didn't let the Muslims in. And I got a lady sitting right here whose daughter was raped by Muslims. She's been to these foreign countries. It is not a pleasant place. Actually, this is Enterman's. Not big. So I'm just kind of reminded of that Don Henley song. We met the enemy, and he's us. I've been trying to put the things together, bring bikers together, inform bikers with what's going on, inform the veterans, and what it's got me is hated. Hated, by our own people. How do we fight that? And I tried to get Gordon Duff to answer that. Here's a strategist for the military, understands what's going on, understands that all of these governments that have killed these people, that have murdered these people that they're talking about here, they're all controlled basically by the banksters. I've told you that the war on terror is a war against anyone, anywhere that didn't want to go along with the one world government of the banksters, by the banksters, and for the banksters. And I think that is accurate. I think that is accurate. It's our government that blew up this. It's our government that was involved and had knowledge in 9/11. Why did they do it? Well, people don't want to believe that our government, our CIA, our FBI, our Mossad would actually do something against the American people. But they do it over and over again. I mean, just in a brief history here, last 40 or 50 years, we have been, they've been killing Americans. Vicky Weaver, Randy Weaver's wife, attacking Randy Weaver, attacking the people in Waco, attacking people, Jerry and Joe Kane, shot them dead without a trial, without nothing. And I believe Jerry Kane's wife has built a pretty firm picture that these videos were manufactured. No, it's the government against us. Alright, let me see here. And by the way, on this innocent betrayed, they just give you a figure. They give you a figure. And then WorldNet Daily doesn't tell you anything about who's responsible. Buy the book, buy the video. Well, maybe I'm doing my marketing wrong. Now, let's see. Now you know a federal judge. So the federal judges are right in there with this. Federal judge kicked Orly Tate out. Told her this ain't a good day for you. This ain't your luck ain't very good here, and kicked out the whole birth certificate bullshit. Didn't want to hear it. It was brought to light that back in 1961, people of color were called Negroes. So how can this birth certificate state he's an African American when that term wasn't even used back then? And guy writing me says, I tell you right now, I've never given this birther issue any credit. I watch a hype crazies come out, completely dismissed the entire ordeal together. In fact, not until the White House released the birth certificate that it gained my attention. First of all, the birth certificate that the White House released lists Obama's birth date is August 4th, 1961, and lists Barack Hussein Obama as his father. No big deal, right? It also shows that the father is aged 25 years old and that Obama's father was born in Kenya, East Africa. That wouldn't seem like anything of concern except the fact that Kenya did not even exist until 1963, 2 whole years after Obama's birth and 27 years after his father's death. How could Obama's father have been born in a country that did not yet exist? And up until Kenya was formed in 1963, it was known as the British East Africa Protectorate. And another item is that the hospital that Obama was born in on the birth certificate released by the White House, the place of birth is listed as Kapiolani Maternity and Gynecological Hospital. That cannot be because the hospital in question in 1961 were called the Children's Hospital and the Kapiolani Maternity Home. The name did not change until 1978 when these two hospitals merged. So how can this particular name of the hospital be on our birth certificate dated 1961 if it had not been applied to it until 1978? Well, just a little sign about Obama being in power now. And the invasion, now I'm trying to get a event together down here in Arizona to help the sheriff, to make people aware. The sheriff is our last elected law enforcement. He's the one that really, the people that answers to the people. And there's some of them. The sheriff in Pima County is not a good guy, but the sheriff in Cochise County and Pinal County, they want to talk about it. And so we're going to try to set that up so they can do that. But up in Michigan, are you aware that Muslim men are allowed to have as many as 4 wives? Many Muslims have immigrated to the U.S. and brought their 2, 3, or 4 wives with them, but the U.S. does not allow multiple marriages, so the man lists 1 wife as his and signs the other 2 or 3 up as an extended family on welfare and other free government programs. Michigan has the highest population of Muslims in the United States. When President Obama took office, the United States paid several millions to have large numbers of Palestinians, all Muslim, immigrated here from Palestine. We don't pay for other persons to immigrate here. I'm sure some of those Muslims moved to Michigan with the current number of Muslims already established there. So in Michigan now, you call Public Assistance Office, you're told, press 1 for English, press 2 for Arabic, or 3 for Spanish. And this has basically happened clandestinely. No public announcement or opportunity to vote on this was offered to the American people. They're just adopting an official stance and using taxpayer money for it in various capacities without public knowledge or approval. And somebody else pointed out, if Christians were Christians, there would be no churches in the theological and ecclesial sense of the world. There would be no popes, cardinals, sitting on the seats of power and ruling the consciousnesses of men. There would be no council meetings to formulate rules and regulations for the control of human thought and conduct. There would be no canon law imposed by the punny prelates upon men better than themselves. Can you imagine Jesus coming back to the world today and recognizing for a single moment the lordly men who presume to exercise authority in the Christian world in his holy name? Now, Jesus was apart from and above these matters of worldly interest. He was not concerned with institutions, societies, offices, or official rules or laws. The only church he ever knew was the synagogue, which at the very opening of his public ministry cast him out from its so-called sacred precincts. Dictatorial authority, ecclesiastical systems, and organization of any kind was unknown to the apostles who first followed in the footsteps of Jesus. If Christians were Christian, there would be no creeds or dogma. If Jesus were to return to earth and read the Apostles' Creed, he would ask, what does this mean? If he were to ponder the creed, his mind would be thrown into confusion and dismay. If he were to encounter the 31 articles, he'd declare either he did not understand them or else they were not true. If there were Christians, there would be no denominations in the Christian church world. If Christians were really Christians, they would not quarrel with one another, nor separate from one another, but would rather be members together in the one body of Christ. Can you picture Jesus coming back today and seeking out the fellowship of his own, walking the streets and looking at the churches? The church, as God would say, is a Baptist church. And Jesus would ask, what is a Baptist church? This church, as God would say, is a Presbyterian church. And Jesus would ask, what do you mean by a Presbyterian church? This church, as God would say, is a Catholic church. And Jesus would say, I never heard of a Catholic church either. After a time, Jesus, wearing confused, would ask feebly of his guide, where is the church of God? The Christian world today is torn into fragments. Divide and conquer is what I've told you their plan is, and their plan is there. And they're using the other religions against us, and they're using our own religion against us. And of course, these people are deluded too. They're saying Jesus was a Jew. I don't believe that. His early followers were Jews. Some of them were. Some of them might have been. You know, I'm sure Gordon Duff's ancestors were out there socializing and walking maybe across the Caucasus Mountains with my ancestors. I don't believe my ancestors are Jews. But then again, I don't know who my grandmother slept with. Do you? People are talking about Duff's comment, if you're Semitic, it means you're from Somalia. They're still commenting on that. All right. Let's see what we got here. The problem here